David Lynch's Eraserhead has puzzled people with its surreal sounds and images since its release in 1977. According to Lynch, all interpretations of the film are equally valid, yet none have pinpointed the entire scope of his intentions, his interpretation. Many see the film as an expression of David Lynch's past anxieties from reluctantly becoming a father during his youth. His daughter Jennifer has stated her unplanned conception and unexpected birth defects, such as clubbed feet, have influenced her father during the production of Eraserhead. While this is a popular reading of the film, Lynch says we are only scratching the surface. As far as I am concerned, the intended meaning of Eraserhead is a private one between David Lynch and his daughter Jennifer. What we do know from Lynch's words is that the film is meant to be a dream, and a spiritual one at that. Because the film is a dream, it should be approached as such. A viewer may take pleasure in forming educated guesses as to what Lynch's intentions were, or parse meaning for themselves, based on what the film presents them with. It is best not to reduce the film down to a single interpretation, but instead surrender ourselves to the dream, allow the dream to guide us. Of course, it is within human interest to interpret dreams, whether to better understand current subconscious anxieties, or to prophesy the future. Dreams may not make a whole lot of sense on a literal level, but may say something about our psychology, and how the subconscious processes the world, and makes symbolic connections, sometimes between two unlike things. In dreams, there are very few roles, and their artifice can be exposed at any point. In your dream, everyone is you, and at the same time, nobody is. Outside of lucid dreaming, we are generally on autopilot. We may have goals and desires in the dream, but we lack the autonomy in the worlds that the mind constructs. I read Lynch as expressing ideas with a sort of dream logic. Everything is a reflection of the figurative dreamer state of mind, as seen through protagonist Henry Spencer. A feeling or an idea may come to Henry, and it manifests in the people around him and the environment that he inhabits, sometimes in illogical and nonsensical ways. What does this mean? Well, in my opinion, Eraserhead is all about creation and castration. What is creation? The act of creation is bringing something new into existence. However, we can't build something out of nothing. Only a god can do that. We must use pre-existing resources to create something tangible. It is said that all acts of creation are also acts of destruction. To create something new, we must destroy something old. Destruction is at the core of creation. And so, as societies evolve into a more technological and industrial age, they exhaust resources in the process. They destroy to build. What is castration? Well, dictionaries tend to settle on two primary definitions. Most commonly, castration refers to the removal or destruction of the testicles on animals and men. Not just men, though. It can also mean depriving a person, place, or thing of its power, life, and integrity. Those assets are thought to be masculine traits, as men traditionally led society. But when power is taken away from men, or from a society, there's a sense of castration. In Eraserhead, both Henry and the nightmarish world he inhabits have been castrated. The world is dying around him. The industrial landscape made progress in society, but it is killing the natural world. Lynch establishes this with his impeccable sound design and striking visuals. They establish the mood of paranoia and unease of the impending end times. The American dream has cannibalized itself. Screeches and howls emerge from machines that have a hold on people more than people have a hold on them. The natural and the industrial world blend together, for the former is being killed off by the latter. Nothing can be trusted. We hear what sounds to be cicadas chirping from trees, but it could also be train steam. We hear what sounds like lightning, but it could be explosions or rumbles from the factory. Loud pounds echo across the city. It sounds as though there's an elusive and oppressive force hovering over the characters and causing them to live in these poor conditions. People are living fractured lives, marked by fractured communication. They want peace and happiness, as everyone always does, but they must make do with what little is given to them. There is little sky, there is little horizon. Smoke and steam fill the air. The environment is cold and foggy. Plants are dying. There is dirt, mounds of dirt, water over dirt. Who is telling what is under the dirt? There is a labyrinth of pipes leading everywhere and nowhere. There are tall buildings with flickering lights, slow elevators, and cramped apartment rooms. There are broken homes with broken roofs and broken windows. Outside Henry's window, there is nothing in sight but a brick wall. Henry is trapped, but he is not the only one who is trapped. He longs to escape and listens to old music, evoking a sense of nostalgia for a time so long ago. He looks towards his radiator, which brings him warmth in these dark times. This is the aftermath of something big, something cataclysmic. Eraserhead takes place after a nuclear fallout, indicated by the framed photograph of the atomic bomb in Henry's apartment, as well as the shape of the entryway to the dining room in the ex's house. This was one of humankind's greatest creations, but our creation leads to our destruction. Bill X, the father of Henry's girlfriend Mary, has worked as a plumber for 30 years and recalls a time when the town was in a more ideal state, when it was full of pastures. But now, all that is left is a hellish wasteland.
Well, printing's your business, huh? Plumbing's mine. 30 years. I've seen this neighborhood change from pastures to the hellhole it is now. I'd put every damn pipe in this neighborhood.
Work has left Bill with weak joints. He has gone against doctor's orders and continued using his arm, but now all that is left is numbness.
I had an operation on my arm here. Doctors said I wouldn't be able to use it. Well, what the hell do they know, I said, and pretty soon I had my arm back again. Now I can't feel a damn thing in it. All numb.
Even the more spiritual beings appear affected by the nuclear fallout. The man in the planet and the woman in the radiator are deformed with bumpy skin and bulging cheeks. The man looks as if impacted by nuclear radiation. The woman as if she were the mushroom cloud. Henry faces castration, not just environmentally, but also socially. Social traditions are human creations, and like all human creations, they necessitate destruction. In this case, it is the destruction of Henry's self. He is castrated by the social traditions he wanted to avoid, but were thrusted upon him due to his pursuit of individually defined masculine liberation. He stepped in this puddle, and now his sock is all wet. The film begins with conception. There is Henry, and there is the planet, and in that planet is the house, with the man behind the controls. From Henry's body emerges his seed, his child created through fertilization. The man in the planet acts as the determiner of destiny, and pulls a switch to achieve conception. And into the puddle and out of the yonic pit emerges the child into the light. But we see Henry looking back at us, and looking back at what he's done. But he goes on to carry out his day, on vacation, in this factory world that creates him and brings him down. Life is a cyclical game, and sometimes there's little to do other than to conform. Conform to traditional gender roles. The man as father and breadwinner, the woman as mother and homemaker. Although it's clear what works for some does not work for all. Henry is not ready to settle down. He doesn't want to work either. He is on vacation.
What do you do? Oh, I'm on vacation.
But as he becomes a parent, he is thrusted into a set of societal expectations as a man and as a father. And soon, what little is left of his individuality will be erased from him. In a way, the child is also Henry. It's a sort of paradox in a never-ending pattern. As children, we are raised by our parents, and then we are expected to raise our children. Our children carry our bloodlines and our names, just as we carry our parents. And even as humankind continues its downward spiral into environmental domination and decay, people continue to adapt and prolong their traditions for their children, even though the world of yesteryear cannot possibly be conserved. Henry does not necessarily want to be a father, and does not necessarily want to be with Mary. We can tell that they broke up. Something ended between them. The photograph was torn in two, and they remain distant from each other. But Henry is called over for a family dinner. It is here that he learns he is the father to Mary's premature baby. Well, if it's even a baby at all.
And you're the father.
But that's impossible. It's only...
Mother, they're still not sure it is a baby.
It's premature, but there's a baby.
The birth of the child is confirmed with a series of bizarre and unsettling images and sounds. A dog breastfeeds her puppies, but the sounds of suckling appear more like rats devouring an animal's corpse.
Just cut them up like regular chickens?
Sure, just cut them up like regular chickens.
Henry cuts the man-made chicken, causing it to move and bleed out, as if it were the violent birth of the child. Mary remains saddened, but her mother enters a somewhat orgasmic state. She confronts Henry about his sex life and makes a move onto him. Generation to generation, we pass on aspects of our identities onto our children. The child is Henry. Mary is her mother, or at least will be. We see another generation through Mary's grandmother, who sits in the kitchen in a vegetative state. Her arms are puppeteered like marionette dolls to stir salad and to smoke. Her life is more or less gone, passed on to her children. Her body is wasting away, like food in the trash bin. It's likely that this is the tradition and the trajectory subsequent generations will take, except things will only get worse.
After the two of you are married, which should be very soon, you can pick the baby up.
Mary's mother insists that Henry weds her daughter, despite both parties being reluctant to do so. They commit to each other, as they know no other alternative.
You don't mind, do you, Henry? I mean, about getting married?
No.
Mary becomes fed up with the child very quickly, aggressively force-feeding them when they reject food, and shouting at them when they cry at night.
Shut up!
Henry lets this happen. He does not tell her how to be a mother, but she does tell him how to be a father. Because he is on vacation instead of working, she demands he take care of the child, as she gets a good night's rest at her parents' home.
I can't even sleep. I'm losing my mind. You're on vacation now. You can take care of it for a night.
We see Mary struggle in raising a child she hardly wants, and a marriage she hardly wants, to reach its breaking point. She pulls her suitcase out from under the bed. There is some clever subliminal communication through the visuals here. Mary is seen crying behind the bars of the bedpost, as if a prisoner to the environment she now occupies. The bed violently shakes, as it would during sex, and out from the bed comes the suitcase. The very thing that keeps the two together is also what breaks them apart. The act of creation leads to destruction. Henry fears the very child he created will eventually destroy him, if not in a literal sense, at least in an existential sense. Like the Eraserheads of pencils, Henry is used and used, beat down until there is nothing left, until he will be replaced. He can't catch a break or leave the room for a bit without the child crying out to him, not necessarily even to be loved and cared for by their father, but simply to crawl under the father's skin. We can view the child in several ways. There's the literal baby in the context of the narrative, but also the metaphorical representation of several things. The banality of human creation, the nightmare to the dream, the manifestation of fear, the literal father, and even the father's Eraserhead. His penis. Yes, well, not just his penis, but manhood itself, which is represented by phallic shapes. Henry experiences sexual castration as at various points of time he is consumed by his temptations that he is not socially allowed to act upon. He is shunned by Mary's mother for sleeping with her daughter and unknowingly conceiving a child out of wedlock. Henry says his sex life isn't her business, and that what he does with someone he loves is a private matter.
I love Mary.
Henry, I asked you if you and Mary had sexual intercourse.
Well, I don't think that's any of your business.
Henry!
He is shaken with guilt and anxiety, and even experiences a nosebleed. Of course, those who enforce puritanical rules of sex are often hypocritical, evident by the mother's advances on Henry.
Well,
Henry is not comfortably married, but he tries to make it work, both for himself and for his wife and child. Henry attempts intimacy with Mary, but his advances are swiftly ignored and rejected. If the child represents his penis, we can see the whining and crying as Henry's moment of sexual desperation to consummate his marriage, or find a sense of sexual gratification elsewhere. Henry also gets this little wormy thing in the mail. From who? I don't know, but he gets it, and he lies to his wife about it. He says that he has an empty mailbox. This wormy thing, like the child, also represents Henry's sexual organs and sex drive, as well as his masculinity. You see, he feels castrated by society and his work. So, like other deviances from the nuclear family, sex is shunned. So he keeps his masculinity and sexual desires hidden in the cupboard, only for them to grow and run wild. And eventually we enter inside the head of this penis, and the nightmare carries on into sexual perversion. Seeing that this is dream logic and nothing is finite, the baby can at once represent two paradoxical forces. The child can be sex and the barrier of sex. It is through sex that babies are created, after all. So the child is sick. They dictate Henry's life. They ruin relationships, drive people mad. And so does his sexuality. So does Henry's penis. And so he gives in to his lustful desires and has a sexual affair with his lonely and seductive neighbor. This is how he tames the penis and quiets his kid. However, the woman is haunted by his child, and the family she very well could be destroying. And after sex, all she can see of him now is his child taking his place, or a penis for his head. And because all that remains of Henry is a loss of identity, overcome by sex, which informs and destroys his masculine essence, she moves on to another man, leaving Henry alone to tend to a sick child and a fractured sex life, stripped of his dignity and of his individuality. Henry longs for a way out of the hell that he is living in. His dreams of the lady in the radiator bring him relative comfort. She steps on these spermy wormies, which rain from the ceiling, bringing an end to life, before it can really begin at all. She destroys not simply life, but the potential for life. And she does this with a gleeful smile on her bright face. Seeing that this is in Henry's radiator, it can be reasoned that the sperm that rains upon her belongs to Henry, and that he is ejaculating into this place of warmth over a fantasy woman. Henry awakens from a wet dream of this lady, and before Mary can notice, Henry cleans his covers, throwing the sperm against the wall. This shows that sperm cells are constantly robbed of their potential for conception through masturbation and wet dreams. Sperm cells also die in their race to fertilization. They are not inherently valuable, regardless of their potential. I see this scene as saying it's okay to have sex, so long as it's healthy. Of course, Henry has sex out of lust and out of love. The result of lust is guilt, but the result of love is a lifelong commitment, eating away at the family and himself. Henry shouldn't exactly be to blame for the child being born into this world and living in suffering. Neither Henry nor Mary wanted to be parents. Their parentage and their marriage was constructed by social tradition and bad luck. But because Mary gave birth, the child suffers. Perhaps it would have been in everyone's best interest if Mary had just aborted. The baby is premature. How premature, we don't know. They maintain their original sperm-like appearance. And maybe that lucky sperm which fertilized Mary's egg isn't lucky in the end. We can read this film as either actively or passively promoting contraceptives and abortion. maybe even promoting an antinatalist message. Although, yes, despite this reading, I am sure David Lynch does love his kids. But at least in some situations, bringing life into this world might be the irresponsible thing to do. In the context of Eraserhead, everything around Henry is either dead or dying. Humanity is breathing its last breath. And it may be better for humanity to simply just end, or let itself die, than for it to carry on in endless cycles of suffering. Henry experiences psychological castration, a hyperreal dissonance between his mind and reality, drifting between the nightmare world of his waking day and the ambivalent dreams of his stormy nights. The film is an abstract representation of a dream all the way through, but precisely what is and isn't a dream within the context of the narrative isn't always so clear-cut.
In heaven, everything is fine.
The lady in the radiator sings a song. This gives Henry hope, not for life on Earth as it is now, but for something after death. The world is cruel, but in heaven, everything is fine.
You got your good things, I've got mine.
After the lady sings, Henry joins her in the dream state and comes into contact with her. The embrace of death and the flash of heaven's light gives him a glimpse for what is to come for his soul. It's as cathartic as it is frightening. After she disappears, Henry is even more scared and anxious. He briefly sees the man in the planet. Henry subtly shakes his head at the man behind the controls and looks down and away from him. He wants out, away from his programming, his expectations. Henry's sperm blows across the ground like trash in the wind. And behind the black curtain rolls in a dying tree, mounted on some wheeled platform. This is life relying on technology when it is better off dead. With medicine technology, people do not simply prolong life, they also prolong suffering. Henry anxiously backs off to the corner and fondles the bar of the spectator's post. This stimulates him, which in turn gives birth to the child. His head comes off, falls onto the ground. The tree bleeds out, drenching the head in blood. The child resumes their father's place, in their father's clothes. Henry's individual identity is torn away from him, and now his child replaces him. Life begins with a puddle of water, but it ends with a puddle of blood. His face sinks into the carnage of painful existence. The child kills their father. It's quite Oedipal. What remains of Henry isn't buried beneath the dirt. Instead, his head breaks on the concrete of his social environment. His body isn't put to rest. A child carries the head to a pencil factory. Henry's brains are used to create erasers for pencils. This perplexing series of images communicates multiple things. For one, Henry is ultimately enslaved to the workforce, even after death. Everyone in the city is. They're stripped of their individualism, stripped of their dreams. They live in a system built upon exploitation, not simply of the body, but also of the mind. Like the individual pencils in a machine, people are rendered insignificant. Their worth measured by their utility to contribute to their industry. And if they're on vacation, they cannot take a break from their harsh social responsibilities. In this case, it's being the family man. Either way, people are expendable. The eraser will break. So Henry feels he must take control of his life, take actions into his own hands, so that the nightmare ceases, so that he can embrace the lady in heaven. We write our stories, but the pencil wears down little by little. And pieces of the body, the pencil shavings, are lost like snow in spring. Every line that the pencil draws, the mind can also erase. Henry awakens once more, and instead of seeing the brick wall in his way, he bears witness to the violent struggle below. A struggle that was always there. Henry chooses to end the cycle of violence with more violence, choosing to castrate his spirituality and operate on his own free will. The fears that Henry creates mocks him with laughter, but at this point the dreamer knows he is dreaming, because your soul can't die in a dream. And so he acts on his own will. The man in the planet can no longer control Henry's destiny. Only Henry can. He has achieved lucid dreaming. His mind has gained power, and in the face of society, and in the face of God, he chooses his own path, castrating his controller in the process. Henry comes to peace with the world around him, with his fear, with his sexuality, with his child. He cuts open the bandages around the baby's barely formed body. Essentially, the body does not exist, but the child wants their father's body. To Henry, the child is a parasite. But he also loves them. He cares for them. He does not want them to suffer, and so he kills them, out of mercy. It's no coincidence that the internal organs of the child somewhat resemble testicles. And thus, this infanticide is also a castration inflicted by Henry. It's an end to Henry's bloodline, an end to tradition, and an end to suffering. And it's also an end to himself, because the child is also him. They are an extension of his body and soul. And together the cries begin to cease. Finally. Henry finally is able to close his eyes. Henry is finally able to forever sleep. Henry embraces the lady of his dreams. He embraces the light. He is in heaven now, and in heaven, everything is fine.
In heaven, everything is fine. In heaven, everything is fine. In heaven, everything is fine. You got your good things, and I've got mine.
Believe it or not, Eraserhead is my most spiritual film.
Elaborate on that.
No, I won't.